Emma Clark had always believed her life was too ordinary to ever be touched by the kind of horror she read about online. The kind that happened to other people in other places, never to someone like her, living in a small, quiet apartment tucked inside a modest neighborhood where everyone minded their own business, where days blended peacefully into nights and the click of her keyboard was often the loudest sound in her home. She liked the calm, the routine, the absence of chaos. She worked as a freelance designer from home, rarely socialized beyond her best friend Lucy and a handful of old college acquaintances, and after her breakup 6 months earlier, she had fully embraced solitude. But if she had known what was coming, how brutally her life would be twisted, she might have treasured that silence a little less. It started on a rainy Tuesday night. The kind of night where raindrops hammered the window like persistent fingers trying to get in, and a heavy gray sky swallowed the city in a sheet of gloom. Emma sat curled on her sofa, a soft blanket wrapped around her, her laptop warming her knees as she typed away at a client project. She had paused only to stretch when her phone buzzed beside her, its sharp vibrations slicing through the quiet. She glanced at the screen. Unknown caller. She frowned, but ignored it. People dial wrong numbers all the time. The phone stopped ringing. A moment of silence followed before it buzzed again. Same number. Something in her chest tightened. Wrong numbers rarely call twice. Still she answered, pressing the phone to her ear with a cautious, "Hello?" For a moment, there was nothing. No static, no voice, no distant echo. Just the faint sound of breathing. Slow. Controlled. Male. Emma stiffened. "Who is this?" she asked, her tone flat but wary. Another silence. Then a soft inhale. And then a cold, low voice spoke, each word sliding out with unsettling precision. "I finally found you." Emma felt her skin crawl. "I think you have the wrong number," she said quickly, ready to hang up, but the voice replied before she could move. "No," he said with a quiet certainty that chilled her. "I dialed exactly who I meant to. Emma Clark, now you belong to me." Her hand froze mid-air. A spike of terror surged through her veins. "How do you know my name?" she whispered. A soft chuckle filled her ear, almost affectionate, almost familiar, yet unmistakably wrong. "Sweet Emma, I know everything." The line went dead. Emma sat frozen, her breath trapped in her chest. She stared at her phone, her mind scrambling for explanations. A prank? Someone from work? A client? Her ex? But none of it fit. She didn't recognize the voice. Her ex was loud, impulsive, not cold and deliberate like this. She set the phone down and tried to steady her breathing, telling herself it meant nothing. People played sick jokes all the time. She returned to her laptop, but her fingers trembled too much to type. Minutes passed. Her phone buzzed again. She glanced over and a chill stabbed through her as she read the new message. "Step outside." Her entire body tensed. Her eyes darted toward the living room window. The blinds were half drawn, rain streaking the glass. Could someone be watching her from the street? No, impossible. But the voice had known her name. She stood slowly, careful with each step as though her floor might shatter under her weight. Approaching the window, she lifted the blinds just enough to peek out. The street was mostly empty, wet, gleaming with reflections of streetlights, 1 or 2 cars passing. But her eyes locked onto a black sedan parked across the street. Its headlights were off. The engine wasn't. She could see the faint vibration of exhaust fumes drifting from its tailpipe. Someone was sitting inside, watching. Her breath hitched. She let the blinds fall, heart racing. She took a step back, and the lights in her apartment flickered once, twice, then shut off completely. Darkness swallowed her. Emma sucked in a sharp breath. She groped for her phone's flashlight, flicked it on, and spun around in the beam's narrow glow. Everything looked normal, but she felt something wrong in the air, like the room was holding its breath. "This is stupid," she whispered to herself, forcing a shaky laugh. "It's just a power outage." But power outages didn't happen only in her apartment. Her neighbor's lights glowed through the hallway crack beneath her front door. Her outage was personal, singled out, a targeted act. She swallowed hard and rushed to the breaker box, flipping switches, but nothing turned on. She called Lucy. No answer. She texted her, "Hey, call me ASAP. Something weird is happening." She stared at her phone until the typing dots appeared, then disappeared. No reply came. A surge of unease rolled through her. She paced back into her living room, turning in circles, trying to calm herself. She would call the police. Yes, that's what normal people did. But then she froze. Her phone vibrated again. A voicemail. There had been no ring this time. Her throat tightened. Slowly, she pressed play. The message began with breathing again. Long, slow, as if savoring the sound of her fear. Then the voice whispered, "I'm closer than you think." The rest of the night, Emma didn't sleep. She stayed on the couch, every light she could control switched on again after the power mysteriously returned 20 minutes later. She kept the TV running for sound, but every creak in her apartment, every shifting shadow made her jump. She considered calling the police, but what would she say? That someone called her and scared her? No crime committed, no evidence concrete. But the next morning proved she should have worried sooner. She stumbled out of bed, exhausted, still shaken. She made coffee, trying to reassemble her normal life. When she opened her front door to pick up a package she was expecting, she noticed something small and metallic lying on her welcome mat. She crouched. Her stomach twisted. It was a SIM card. Taped to it was a note written in precise handwriting. "Keep your phone charged."
She jerked upright, heart thundering, scanning the hallway. No one. But someone had been here, close enough to touch her door, close enough to leave something without being heard. Panic smothered her throat. She called Lucy again, desperate for a voice she trusted. Lucy answered this time, groggy. Emma spilled everything in a rush. The call, the message, the blackout, the SIM card. Lucy cursed loudly and insisted they meet for lunch. "This is not okay, Em. We're going to the police. I swear we're reporting this guy." Emma agreed. She needed help. They met at their usual cafe, but Emma couldn't focus. She kept glancing at the entrance, checking reflections in the window, watching the street for the black sedan. Lucy listened, holding her hand. "It's probably just a sick prank," Lucy tried to assure her, though her tone betrayed her doubts. "People do insane things for laughs." "He knew my name. He knew where I lived." Lucy's expression hardened. "We're reporting it." And they did. Officer Mark Hensley, mid-30s, with tired eyes and a calm voice, took the report. He asked precise questions. Too precise, Emma thought. He seemed unusually invested, almost too eager to help. But she dismissed her unease. She was paranoid. Anyone would be after a night like that. Mark ended the report with, "If he contacts you again, call us immediately, no matter the time." Emma nodded. Lucy insisted she stay at her place, but Emma refused. Her apartment was her safe space. She didn't want this creep to take that from her too. That night, Emma tried to carry on normally. She made dinner, she watched a show, she worked. She tried to ignore how often she glanced at the window. It was around 11 p.m. when her phone rang again. Unknown caller. Her breath stuttered. Her thumb hovered over the decline button, but she didn't press it. The phone rang, then silence. Not even a voicemail this time. She thought it was over, until her phone buzzed with a text. "Did the police make you feel safe?" Emma's blood ran cold. She hadn't mentioned the police to anyone except Lucy, and Lucy wasn't the type to talk. That meant something else, something worse. He was watching, reading her movements, tracking her. Her fingers trembled as she typed back, "Who are you?" 3 dots appeared, like he was answering in real time. Then the reply came, "I'm the one who sees you." She stared at the screen, hands shaking violently now. Then another message arrived before she could breathe. "I like the blue shirt. It suits you." Emma froze. She was wearing a blue shirt. Right now. in her living room, alone. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She sprinted to her windows and yanked the curtains shut. Then she checked every corner of the apartment, the closet, under the bed, behind the shower curtain. Nothing, but someone was watching. The next morning, Lucy returned with tools, and the two tore through Emma's apartment searching for cameras. They found the first one behind her bedroom vent, a tiny black lens tucked behind the metal slits. Emma nearly vomited. They found another inside the smoke detector, another behind a photo frame, and the worst one, inside a tiny hole in the bathroom mirror frame, positioned perfectly to see the entire bathroom. Emma collapsed to the floor, shaking uncontrollably. Lucy held her, voice trembling as she said, "Em, this is not a joke. This is serious. We have to go back to the police." Officer Mark returned to the apartment with a team. He sealed the cameras and evidence bags. His face tightened with something Emma couldn't read. Anger? Concern? Something else? He asked her questions again, but this time he sounded heavier, like he knew more than he admitted. "Have you noticed anything else?" he asked. Emma shook her head. She didn't want to admit how scared she was, but she told him about the power outage, the black sedan, the messages. Mark wrote everything down. He promised patrol would drive by more often, but the fear didn't leave Emma after he left. The apartment felt tainted, invaded, poisoned. She couldn't shower without imagining eyes on her, couldn't sleep without hearing phantom footsteps, couldn't breathe without wondering if the air carried someone else's breath. She stayed awake until dawn, drifting in and out of shallow sleep. And then the call came again. She didn't answer. She couldn't. But a new message arrived immediately. "You're tired. You should sleep earlier." That meant he had seen her night, her lights, her restless shifting, her insomnia. She typed back, "Stop contacting me. I'm going to the police." His answer came instantly. "They can't save you." Another message. "But I can find you anywhere." Another. "I'm closer than last night." Emma's fear spiraled into hysteria. She called Lucy, barely able to speak through sobs. Lucy came running within minutes, but the terror didn't stop. Emma started noticing tiny details she had overlooked before, scratches around her door lock that hadn't been there last week, her kitchen drawers slightly rearranged, objects shifted inches from where she remembered putting them. She found her favorite mug sitting on her desk, though she hadn't used it in days. Someone had been inside, not once, not twice, but repeatedly, watching, touching, moving things with purpose, with familiarity. That evening, as Emma tried to steady herself, a notification lit up her phone again. This one was not a text or call. It was a photo, a picture taken inside her apartment, of her, sleeping on the couch, from only a few feet away. Emma stared at the image, terror suffocating her. She didn't move, she didn't breathe, because behind her, in the photo, she could see something else. A shadow in the far corner of the room, a human shape, standing, watching, waiting. The final message of the night arrived seconds later. It read, "Tomorrow, you'll meet me. Don't be late." And with that, the nightmare truly began. Emma didn't remember falling asleep, only the moment she woke with a violent gasp, the morning sun slicing through the curtains like a blade. Her heart was already racing, pounding against her ribs as if trying to escape her body, her breath shallow and fast. Yesterday's terror hadn't faded with sleep. It clung to her like damp fabric, heavy and suffocating. The memory of the photo, her sleeping form, the shadow behind her, seared itself into her mind. She scrambled off the couch, every muscle tight, every sound amplified in her ears. The apartment felt colder this morning, dimmer somehow, as if the walls themselves absorbed her panic. She checked the corners, behind the doors, under the bed, inside the closets. Nothing. No shadowy figure, no sign of intrusion. But she no longer trusted what she saw. Her reality had become unreliable. She showered with the door open, unable to bear the enclosed space, scrubbing herself mechanically while flinching at every creak in the pipes.
When she stepped out, wrapped in a towel, she noticed her phone blinking on the counter with a message that hadn't been there minutes ago. You didn't sleep well. The implication hit her with crushing force. He had been watching her even after the police left, even after she locked everything. She gripped the sink, swallowing the urge to scream. Lucy arrived minutes later, letting herself in with the spare key Emma had given her years ago. She froze when she saw Emma's pale, trembling form. "Oh my God, Em," she whispered, rushing forward. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Emma let out a broken laugh, because that's exactly how it felt. A ghost that breathed, stalked, and sent messages. She told Lucy about the picture, about the shadow behind her. Lucy's face drained of color. "We're leaving," she said immediately. "Pack a bag. You're not staying here another second." But Emma hesitated. Her apartment, once her safe place, felt poisoned, but also like the only ground she still understood. She shook her head. "If I leave, he'll follow. He already gets inside. What difference does it make where I go?" Lucy clenched her jaw, furious at the invisible enemy they couldn't touch. She dialed Officer Mark without asking. He answered almost instantly, asking them to clarify everything. 20 minutes later, he was at the door again, this time with a serious expression, his jaw set, his body tense. He studied the photo Emma showed him, his eyes darkening. "This isn't a prank," he said quietly. "Whoever this is, he has access. He's planned this." Emma felt her stomach flip. Planned this. The phrase felt too real, too sharp. Mark did another sweep of the apartment, but he found nothing. No forced entry, no signs of break-ins, no new cameras. Everything looked undisturbed, which only made it worse. Whoever the man was, he was clean, deliberate, careful, the type who left no trace. While Mark worked, Lucy sat beside Emma, squeezing her hand. "We'll fix this, I promise." But promises meant nothing when Emma's phone buzzed again with a new message. "You shouldn't have guests." Lucy froze mid-sentence. Emma's heart plummeted. Mark snatched the phone, reading the message, his expression tightening with a mix of frustration and concern. He asked Emma to recount again every detail of the past few days, every strange occurrence, every suspicious person, every unfamiliar car. She described the black sedan, the power outage, the messages, the cameras, and then she hesitated. "There was something else," she whispered. Mark leaned closer. "What?" She pointed at her front door. "The scratches around the lock. I didn't notice them before." Mark knelt to inspect the lock, his expression shifting. "These aren't accidents. Someone tampered with this more than once." Lucy sucked in a breath. Emma felt her knees weaken. Mark stood up, his tone firmer than before. "Emma, whoever this is, he's escalating. I'm assigning additional patrols, and I want you to call me directly if anything happens. Anything." His intensity both reassured her and unsettled her. As the officer left, Lucy hugged her tightly, trying to hide her worry. "I'm staying with you. I'm not leaving you alone today." Emma didn't argue this time. The day crawled by painfully slow. Every sound became a threat. The hum of the refrigerator, the footsteps of neighbors upstairs, the rustle of leaves against the window. Emma barely spoke, lost in the looping spiral of fear. She and Lucy tried watching a movie, tried cooking, tried talking about anything else, but the silence between them carried the weight of unsaid dread. When night approached, Emma's anxiety spiked again. The sun setting felt like a countdown. As the sky faded to darker shades, she found herself staring at her phone, terrified of the next message. It came just after 9 p.m. A single sentence. "You'll be alone later." Emma dropped the phone as if it burned her. Lucy grabbed it, her voice shaking, as she said, "Ignore him. Don't respond." But ignoring him didn't matter. He wasn't texting for a reaction. He was texting because he already knew what would happen. And he was right. At 10:17 p.m., Lucy's phone buzzed with an emergency call from her younger brother, car trouble and stranded miles away.
Lucy refused to leave Emma, but Emma insisted, nearly begging her to go. "He wants you gone," Lucy whispered. "That's exactly why you shouldn't be alone." "And that's why you need to go," Emma whispered back. "I won't let him use my life to hurt yours." After several agonizing minutes of arguing, Lucy finally agreed, but only after making Emma promise to stay on video call the entire time. Emma watched from the pure hole as Lucy rushed down the hallway, and then she was alone again. The moment the elevator doors shut behind Lucy, another message appeared on Emma's phone. "Good. Now we can talk properly." And the fear in Emma's chest became something sharp, something suffocating, something that told her tonight would be worse than last night. Much worse.
Emma didn't remember the moment she stopped pacing and finally sank onto the edge of her bed, but she felt the weight of the night pressing down like a physical force, thick and suffocating as she stared at her silent phone. The message he sent last, "Now we can talk properly," echoed inside her skull with a coldness that made her hands tremble uncontrollably. The apartment felt too quiet, as if every object were listening, waiting, anticipating the next moment she would break. She kept the video call window open with Lucy, though Lucy had muted herself while dealing with her brother's car trouble. Emma could see only darkness behind Lucy, the occasional shifting lights from passing cars on the road. She felt guilty keeping her friend exposed to danger, but what choice did she have? This stalker didn't react logically. He reacted intimately, personally, like he believed their connection was real. And now, with the apartment plunged back into the oppressive quiet, Emma felt the walls closing in. She needed to distract herself, to keep her mind from spiraling deeper into panic. So she walked into the kitchen and poured a glass of water, her hands shaking so violently she spilled half of it. She gulped the rest down, forcing air through her lungs, forcing herself not to collapse. When she turned to set the glass down, her phone buzzed again. She froze. The message appeared on her lock screen. "You're pacing too much." Emma's throat closed. She hadn't mentioned anything about pacing to Lucy. Her camera wasn't facing her. She slowly lifted her head, scanning the room. No open windows, no lights on outside, no visible cameras. And yet, he saw her. She typed with trembling fingers, "Where are you?" But there was no answer. She cursed under her breath, anxiety twisting tighter inside her as she walked toward the living room. Every shadow looked deeper. Every corner felt occupied by something unseen. Her footsteps seemed too loud on the hardwood floor, echoing unnaturally in the silent apartment. She reached for the curtain, but hesitated before pulling it back, terrified of what she might see. Slowly, she lifted one corner and peeked through the narrow slit. The black sedan was gone. At first, she felt relief, then dread. Because if he wasn't in the car, he was somewhere else, watching her from a new angle, a better one. She let the curtain fall and backed away, swallowing the lump in her throat. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. Unknown caller. Her pulse exploded. She didn't want to answer, but she knew he would just call again and again and again. He wouldn't stop. He never stopped. She swiped to accept, pressing the phone to her ear like a reluctant confession. "Emma," the voice said, softly, almost tenderly, almost lovingly, "you and I need to meet." Emma's heart beat hard against her ribs. Before she could respond, he continued, "Check your front door." Her vision blurred with terror. "No," she whispered. But the voice didn't raise itself, didn't threaten. Its quiet confidence made it even worse. "Check it." She lowered the phone without hanging up, her body moving on instinct, dread pumping like poison through her veins as she approached the door. The hallway beyond was silent. The overhead light flickered gently from the old wiring. She hesitated, then looked down at the floor. A single object,
lay on her doormat. A small, rectangular, black... a phone. Not hers. She knelt slowly, fingers shaking as she picked it up. The screen lit up instantly with a video already cued. Her breath faltered. The thumbnail showed a location, an abandoned industrial yard she recognized from news stories years ago, the old steel plant on the edge of town. The video autoplayed the moment her thumb touched the glass. It showed a man's silhouette walking through the empty yard, passing rusted containers, stepping into a dark warehouse, and then a message appeared over the footage, typed in white letters, "Be here tomorrow, alone." Emma dropped the phone like it burned her. She lifted her own phone back to her ear, but the line was silent. No breathing, no voice, no end call tone. The call had ended without her noticing. Emma slammed the door shut, locking it twice, then slid down onto the floor, her breath shaking uncontrollably. She stared at the strange device lying on the tiles, the message replaying in her mind. Tomorrow. Alone. Something deep inside her screamed that going was a mistake, a trap. But another part, the terrified but desperate part, knew she had no choice. He was escalating, and if she didn't go, he would come to her. She stayed there on the floor for minutes that felt like hours, until Lucy's voice suddenly echoed through the video call, startling her. "Emma? Emma, talk to me. What happened?" Emma lifted her head, her voice hoarse and breaking, as she whispered, "He wants me to meet him." And that was how the next stage of her nightmare began.
Emma didn't know how she drove home after the encounter at the abandoned yard, nor how she managed to steady her shaking hands long enough to unlock the apartment door. But she remembered the feeling that washed over her the moment she stepped inside, a crushing heaviness, as if the air itself was thick with something watching her, judging her, marking her. The silence clung to her like a living thing, and she felt painfully aware of every corner, every shadow, every place he could have been hiding before. She locked the door twice, slid the chain into place, and pressed her back against the wood, trying to breathe. Lucy was already pacing the living room, her face tear-streaked and furious after Emma told her what happened, after Emma showed her the video and explained the voice, the chase, the disappearing figure. "This isn't random anymore," Lucy whispered through clenched teeth, her hands shaking. "This is obsession. This is someone who thinks he owns you." Emma swallowed hard, hearing again the way the voice had said her name at the yard, not angry, not mocking, but certain, as if claiming property. She explained everything to Officer Mark in a broken rush when he arrived minutes later, his expression tightening with every detail. But something in his eyes bothered her. It wasn't shock. It wasn't disbelief. It was recognition, like he knew more than he was allowed to say. He scribbled notes, asked questions too quickly, too specifically, as though he were piecing together a puzzle he'd already started long before Emma entered the picture. She noticed the way he clenched his jaw when she described the old steel yard, the narrow look he gave the USB videos, and the subtle tremor in his voice when he asked if she had seen the man's face. When she told him she hadn't, his tension didn't ease, it worsened. And then he said something that chilled her. "He's getting bolder. If he's revealing pieces of himself to you, it means he thinks the game is changing." Game. The word made Emma's stomach twist. This wasn't a game. This was her life being dismantled piece by piece. Lucy sat beside her, gripping her hand so tightly her knuckles turned white, but Emma barely felt it. Her mind raced back to the notes he'd left, the pictures, the cameras, the messages, and the worst one, "We've known each other longer than you remember." That line echoed in her ears as she recalled the small box Mark had placed on her table earlier, the one containing items the stalker had left for her, the necklace she lost years ago, a childhood photo, a trinket she hadn't seen since she was 8 years old, things from her past that shouldn't be in anyone's hands, things someone could only have if they had known her long before any of this began. And that was what terrified her most. He wasn't new, he wasn't recent,
He wasn't a stranger who stumbled onto her life. He had been orbiting her for years, maybe her whole life, waiting for a moment she never even knew she had crossed. Lucy tried to convince her to leave the city, to pack and run, but Emma shook her head, tears burning behind her eyes. If I leave, he'll follow. He'll be angry, and this will only get worse. She didn't know how she knew that, but she felt it with terrifying certainty. This wasn't someone who let go. Mark paced the apartment with growing agitation, checking windows, vents, corners, touching the walls as though expecting to find something embedded inside. I watched him, noticing how familiar he seemed with the layout, as if he had studied it already, as if he had imagined scenarios inside these walls before. A strange thought surfaced, unwelcome and cold. What if Mark wasn't as unconnected as he claimed? What if his involvement wasn't a coincidence? She pushed the thought away, ashamed of doubting the one person who seemed to be helping her. But the uncertainty dug its claws deeper when Mark finally spoke again, his voice low and controlled. Emma, has anyone from your past ever acted possessive? Someone from childhood? Teenage years? A neighbor? A family friend? She blinked at him, startled by the sudden shift. Why would you ask that? Mark didn't answer right away. His jaw flexed. He avoided her eyes when he finally murmured, because he's not just watching you. He's leaving pieces of your past. He's telling you he's been here before. That means this isn't a new predator. This is someone who's been waiting. Emma felt the room tilt for a moment. Waiting. This was no longer a nightmare. It was history resurfacing like a monster crawling out of the dark. Lucy looked at Mark sharply. Do you know something? Because you're asking questions like you do. Mark hesitated. That hesitation was all Emma needed to feel dread bloom in her stomach. Something was wrong. Something was incomplete. Something was being withheld. I think, Mark said slowly, that this man isn't finished with the messages. He's going to reveal more, and I don't want you alone when he does. But later that night, Emma's apartment went quiet again. Lucy dozed off on the couch. Mark finally left after insisting he would return in the morning, and Emma sat alone in her bedroom, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The weight of the unknown sat inside her like a stone, and at 3:19 a.m., her phone buzzed. First once, then again, then a third time. Her hand shook as she picked it up. 3 new messages. The first said, "He lies to you." The second, "He's part of this." And the third message, the one that sent icy terror rushing down Emma's spine, was a picture of Officer Mark in her hallway, taken earlier, time-stamped correctly, but from a camera angle inside the ceiling vent. A camera Emma didn't know existed, a camera neither Lucy nor Mark found, meaning he was still in her home, or had been, or never left.
Emma didn't remember leaving the apartment, or how she ended up sitting in the back of the patrol car Mark insisted she ride in. But she remembered the suffocating sense that something irreversible had snapped inside her the moment she saw that picture of him, taken from inside her own vents. The idea that the stalker had been in her apartment while Mark was there, possibly watching both of them, possibly listening, made her skin crawl with a kind of fear she didn't know humans were capable of feeling without dying from it. She stared out the window of the cruiser as the city blurred past, her reflection fractured by streetlights, her face pale, eyes hollow, looking more like a hunted animal than a person. Mark kept glancing at her through the rearview mirror, his jaw clenched, his expression unreadable. Lucy had been left behind only because Emma begged her to stay away, to protect herself, to avoid being caught in whatever storm was now spiraling faster than any of them could understand. Mark was taking her to the station for safety, but each passing minute made her more unsure whether she was heading towards safety or deeper into the nightmare. She didn't trust him. She didn't trust anyone. Not anymore. Not after the messages, not after the hidden cameras no one found. Not after the stalker's quiet confidence that he controlled everything, even her protector. And the worst part was that Emma didn't know which fear to believe, the one that said Mark was involved, or the one that said he wasn't involved at all,
and that the real monster was simply smarter than both of them combined. When they arrived at the station, Mark escorted her inside with a firm but gentle grip on her arm, speaking in low tones to the officers at the front desk. They nodded, eyes widening at the name Emma Clark, as if they had already heard too much about her case, as if the quiet stories had been circulating between shifts. She felt exposed, fragile, observed. Mark led her into a private room, a small windowless space with a metal table and 2 chairs. "Sit," he said, voice tight but not unkind. He shut the door and locked it behind him. The click of the lock made Emma flinch. Mark noticed, exhaling sharply. "Emma, relax. This is for your protection." But the tone in his voice didn't calm her. It only sharpened her dread. She lowered herself into the chair, ignoring how cold the metal felt through her clothes. Mark sat opposite her, leaning forward, his hands clasped tightly, knuckles whitening. "I need you to tell me everything again," he said quietly. Every detail, every word he said, every memory his messages triggered. Anything you haven't told me yet. Emma stared at him. "I told you everything." "No," Mark replied immediately, his eyes burning with an intensity that frightened her. "You told me what you think happened. I need what you felt, what you remembered." She recoiled. "Why does that matter?" Mark's silence was sharp enough to cut. Finally, he spoke again, voice lower, more controlled. "Because, Emma, this isn't the first time a man like this has targeted someone." Her blood froze. "Someone like me?" she whispered. Mark nodded slowly. "Someone who fits a pattern." She leaned back, pulse racing. "What pattern?" Mark hesitated, and that hesitation told her everything. He was hiding something. "Tell me," she demanded. Mark exhaled and looked down, rubbing a hand over his face. "Years ago, before I transferred to this city, there was a case. A man who stalked women, quietly, strategically, long before he ever revealed himself. He watched them for months, sometimes years. He left clues, objects from their childhood, messages that made no sense until much later. He manipulated them into believing they'd always known him." Emma felt her breath slip away. "What happened to the woman?" Mark's eyes lifted to hers, and the answer in them hollowed her out. "One survived. Barely." Emma's hands turned cold. "And the others?" Mark shook his head. "We never found their bodies." The horror settling into Emma was deep, thick, impossible to escape. She felt herself sinking into it, drowning in it. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because your case," Mark swallowed, "it looks the same." Emma's stomach turned, nausea flooding her throat. "Are you saying the man stalking me, he's the same person?" Mark hesitated. Emma felt the air tighten. "I can't say that," Mark finally murmured. "But the similarities, they're too many to ignore." She stared at him, unable to breathe. "Why didn't you tell me this earlier?" Mark leaned in, voice low. "Because I wasn't sure, and because I didn't want to scare you." "Too late," Emma whispered brokenly. The room felt smaller. The air felt thinner. Mark continued. "Whoever this is, he's intelligent. He's careful. And he's more dangerous than you realize. He's been in your home, Emma. He's been steps away from you. He's watching the police. He's watching me." Emma's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" Mark hesitated again. "The picture you got of me, that was taken from a vent. A high corner vent." "So?" "So that means he had a camera angle I couldn't detect, one that wasn't placed recently." Emma froze. "What are you saying?" Mark looked at her with a gravity that sucked the air from the room. "Emma, I think he planted these cameras months ago." Emma's blood ran cold. "Months?" "Maybe years," Mark added quietly. Emma felt the world tilt violently. Years? That meant he'd been watching before the breakup, before her job change, before she moved apartments, before everything. The room blurred around her.
She grabbed the table to steady herself, and then her phone buzzed. Mark reached for it, but Emma already saw the screen. A new message from unknown. Ask him why he follows you long before I did. Emma slowly lifted her gaze to Mark, and Mark froze. His face went white, his jaw clenched, and Emma realized he wasn't shocked by the message. He was terrified of it, because it wasn't a lie. It was something he didn't want her to know. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Mark, why did he say that?" Mark didn't answer, and in that silence, her terror reached a level she didn't know existed.
Emma didn't run. She didn't scream. She didn't even move. She simply sat there in the dim interrogation room, her breath trapped somewhere between her lungs and her throat, while Mark stared at the door as if expecting it to burst open at any second. The message on her phone still glowed on the table, sharp, intrusive, poisonous. Ask him why he followed you long before I did. The words felt like a crack across her reality, a fracture that had been forming slowly, quietly, beneath everything she thought she understood. Now it had split open completely. Mark finally dragged his gaze back to her, and there was something in his expression she had never seen before. Fear, yes, but not the kind aimed at a threat. It was the fear of being exposed, the fear of someone who'd run out of time. "Emma," he started, his voice low, strangled. "I can explain." But Emma was done giving him space to shape the truth. "Explain what?" she whispered, her voice trembling but sharp. "Explain how he knows things about you that I don't? Explain why he keeps implying you were watching me before he was?" Her pulse hammered. "Explain why you look guilty right now?" Mark shot to his feet as if the chair had burned him. He paced once, twice, then slammed his hands on the metal table, leaning over her with a desperation that made her recoil. "It's not what you think," he said, jaw clenched. "I wasn't stalking you." "Then what were you doing?" Emma demanded, her voice rising, brittle with fear. Mark hesitated, too long. "I was assigned to you." Emma's eyes widened. "Assigned? When?" Mark exhaled hard, squeezing his eyes shut before meeting hers again. "A year and a half ago." Her world shattered. "A year? Mark, I didn't know you then." "You didn't, and you weren't supposed to." Emma's breathing turned erratic. "Why would the police assign someone to me? What did I do? What was happening?" Mark shook his head. "It wasn't you. It was him." The room tilted. "What?" "The man stalking you now," Mark said slowly, carefully. "We suspected he had marked someone new. We just didn't know who. There was a pattern, a digital trail, specific behaviors, the way he stalked online before approaching physically. The signs pointed to a woman living in this city, a woman whose online presence shifted abruptly, a woman whose accounts were watched by an abnormal number of unknown devices." Emma stared at him frozen. "You mean me?" Mark swallowed. "Yes, but we didn't know for sure. We couldn't identify you at first. Everything he did was masked, but I was assigned to monitor potential targets and narrow it down." Emma felt sick. "So what? You were watching me, following me, digging through my life?" "Only as much as protocol allowed," Mark insisted, but the words rang hollow. "At first, I didn't know your name. I was looking at patterns, locations, internet activity, community reports, encrypted chatter. But then," his voice softened, "then it became clear. You fit. Too closely." Emma blinked, her throat tight. "So you knew I was being stalked long before I knew?" "Yes," Mark whispered, "but we couldn't warn you without putting you in more danger." She laughed, short, broken. "You think this is less dangerous?" Mark flinched. "But she wasn't done. You followed me. You were in places I didn't expect you. You showed up at the grocery store, outside my building, on the street. You told me it was coincidence." Mark exhaled shakily. "It wasn't." The confession felt like a punch. I didn't want to scare you, he continued, and I couldn't blow the operation. We believed he was escalating, and if we were right, we needed to catch him before he made contact. Emma shook her head, her voice small. But he did make contact. Mark nodded grimly, because he realized he was being watched. A horrifying silence stretched between them. Emma's hands shook. Mark, were you watching me alone? His eyes hardened. No, there's a task force. Or, there was. What do you mean, was? Mark hesitated. 2 agents disappeared. Emma felt ice crawl over her skin. Disappeared? Last month, Mark murmured. No trace, no forced entry, no comps. Just gone. The fear inside Emma twisted into something cold and absolute. You're telling me he got to them? Mark met her eyes, and the dread in his expression was all the answer she needed. Emma's breath shook. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you warn me? Mark's voice cracked. Because the moment you knew you were being watched, you changed. And he thrives on change. Emma buried her face in her hands, tears slipping through her fingers. He was always ahead, even before I knew, even before you knew. Mark didn't speak. And then, Emma's phone buzzed again. Emma froze. Mark lunged for it, but this time she grabbed it before he could touch it. A new message from unknown. He's still not telling you the whole truth. Emma felt her chest collapse. She looked up at Mark, and Mark looked devastated. Emma, he said, his voice breaking, don't read the next message. Her blood turned to ice. Why not? His lips parted, but before he could answer, another message appeared. Emma stared at the glowing screen. Then her eyes lifted to Mark. Her voice shook. Why does he know what you're about to say before you say it? Mark went still, completely, utterly still, like a man watching the last piece of his life crumble. And that was when the lights in the interrogation room flickered, once, twice, then cut out entirely. Darkness swallowed everything. Somewhere in that suffocating blackness, Emma heard a voice. Not a text, not a call. A voice. Close. Too close. I told you, Emma. You belong to me.